Hello everyone, I may be on the verge of a cold here, so there's going to be a lot of cuts in the video when I probably clear my voice or cough, but hang in there with me. This video is going to be what I learned about playing random parties. If you're finding this video and you've never watched a single episode of my campaign, what I did was, I tried to play, well I did not try, I played a whole entire campaign using Excel to make random parties for me. So I grabbed everyone out of the stagecoach, and all those people got mixed up into random positions, and that's what I went to the dungeons with. Which was a nice twist, because for a vast majority of my hours, I tried to make parties that are viable or intentionally catastrophic for fun. And this kind of shot in the middle ground. What happens when I would get good parties made for me, but I'd have to adapt, or I got a party that, on paper, looked absolutely terrible. I did this for about a year and a half of my life, not because the campaign took that long, it's just I can only play about once a week. Campaign took about 80 weeks. There you go. So about a year and a half of my personal life could have easily been done faster if I had more time. Like every other playthrough, some heroes caught my eye. Some caught my eye in a different way that's not great. So to start off this video, I'm going to talk about the heroes I kinda leaned on, where I started liking more, and some of the heroes where I was like, you know what, not my cup of tea. I used to like the Hellion, but now I really like the Hellion. Her ability to do breakthrough was really good. She could attack a variety of positions. She could self-heal. I used to rate her really highly, but I didn't really play her as much. She just didn't really fit like a playstyle for me. But after playing this random playthrough, I really saw some of her strengths and how she can help some parties that are just not quite made for optimal battle. Some of the heroes who caught not the great side of me was the Bounty Hunter and Grave Robber, actually. Bounty Hunter is always up and down for me. Some days I really like him. I still think he's really remarkable in certain comps, but overall, it felt like he either didn't have the greatest utility, or when he was in the front row, his damage wasn't quite measuring up if someone wasn't marked or human, which obviously in a random playthrough, you don't know if you're going to have reliable marks, or I might be going into somewhere where there's not a lot of humanoids. And then we get to the Grave Robber. To start off with, she's never been quite my favorite. And after this, when she would be put in positions where she would not be able to use her strengths, i.e. lunge, or I don't know. I really don't use a Grave Robber that much. It's pretty much lunge, or if you're just going to throw darts or poison darts, I don't know. Overall, the Grave Robber is probably one of the worst heroes in random parties. I'll say that one more time. The Grave Robber is probably one of the worst heroes in random parties. And that's because if she shuffles your party and they shouldn't, game over. If she's in the front row, and once again, she either has to shadow fade or just pick to the face. She really runs out of options quickly depending on where she starts or if the party can't be shuffled. Obviously not her fault for the playstyle. However, there were times where I got Grave Robbers, typically in positions 1 and 2, and it was just a living nightmare. So once again, not a fault of the hero class, but it certainly did not help my dislike for her initially. Now for actual theories and principles I think got reinforced were, I didn't really learn anything, but there's certainly things where I thought were more important, I now see are less important, where at least not the end-all be-all I used to think they were. Now, I will preface, if you didn't see the game, I did beat this on Radiant, but that doesn't mean the enemies hit less hard. Does not mean that like bosses have less HP or the game gives me, you know, like everything's the same minus I think you level up faster. The torch has a few more benefits, so you do dodge a little bit more, but overall, playing on Radiant, I only did that to save myself personal time. You could take all of these into Darkest, all these principles into Darkest. Stygian? I don't know. We would have to talk about that. It's, you have to play pretty perfect to play it on the hardest difficulty, but at least Darkest difficulty, you could take all these same ideas and pretty much get the same results. Just a little longer playtime because the slowdown resolve increase. So what I learned was, I used to think your party composition, or your party, whatever you want to call it, was 95% of what went into a dungeon. I thought if you had a great party, you were pretty much set. Which is still true. Like, if you make a great party, you're still in really good conditions. But I would think When I originally made this idea, I thought it was going to be way worse than it was. I thought I was going to be failing just regular dungeons all the time because we didn't have XYZ stun. We couldn't pull this person, kill this stress damage dealer on turn, blah blah blah. I really thought it was just going to be an absolute nightmare. What I found out is, yes, party composition obviously matters a great deal. There was a few party comps where going in, I pretty much knew, pray to the RNG gods, or yeah, I backed out halfway through because I was like, yeah, I didn't have the heals. I didn't have the stress heals. It was just the wrong party for the wrong boss. There were definitely a few times where I just looked at the party and just kind of laughed. And I was like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with that. So yes, if you make a complete dog crap party, you will get dumpstered in Champion. However, there's parties that were questionable. And I got through Champion level dungeons. Mostly shorts because of A, record time, and B, when you don't have a lot of heals, sometimes short dungeons are all you could get through. So surprisingly, I only lost 5 people outside of the darkest dungeon itself. I lost 1 retreating in the darkest dungeon, and I lost 2 to the Heart of Darkness. So overall, I only lost 8 people when I had never had any control over my party compositions. So if party compositions aren't all that important, what's making up the gap? It's gonna sound kind of funny, entire game knowledge. I've made I think a video or two about this, how Darkest Dungeon is not hard in terms of mechanics, reflexes, honestly even the decision making is like, for the most part, a lot of decisions are pretty straightforward. There's a few where like you could debate, but overall you don't need to be a reflex god, a brainiac, or like some 3 standard deviations above XYZ. This game overall will punish everybody because of lack of knowledge. And I've talked about that. This game is purely knowledge based, but I thought more of that knowledge went to how to build a party, not how to defeat your enemies. And as I played this game, I realized one thing, one very important thing. As long as I could identify one thing, one strategy, one opening, something I could cling to, I could beat every dungeon. It was the parties where I looked at my, what they could do together, and if I couldn't think of a single good opening, they were the ones that struggled. If I could identify this is a dodge party. I remember one party, 2 jesters, both in the front. Absolute nightmare. But it was a double finale. So I wouldn't build it normally because A, jesters are squishy, B, finale debuff. But the plan was we double finale'd, or one finale'd, one Dirk Stab to build up the next finale. And we would always kill either the highest HP damage dealer, or we would just get rid of immediate stress damage dealer, and then the other 2 heroes could either stun, set up the next, whatever I needed. But even in that party, where I had 2 jesters with finales, we could make it work. There was a couple of other really weird compositions where as long as I could identify something, even if it was setting up for round 2, not round 1, it's like, okay, by round 2, all my heroes will be in the right positions, we'll have X buff on, we will have maybe stunned an enemy, and then we can act like it's round 1, even though obviously it would be round 2. Like I said, it was the parties where you could not identify something and then use it on the enemy. And I know that sounds like, so it's a party it's a party composition issue. But it's not, because there were very bad parties and they did get out with a lot of stress. But you were still be able to do the dungeon because you understood the enemy, knew how to use curios, and you understood the skills you have. And all that's very important because, like I said, if you just knew how to combine people and what the enemy composition wanted to do, you could get through. As long as you knew what the enemies wanted to do and you stuck with what you wanted to do, you could make really bad party compositions okay. I'm not going to say they were great. A lot of times I came out with 20, 30 stress, a few afflictions here and there, a few death's doors. Like, I'm not saying you can build an absolute dog party and get out alive, but what I realize is knowledge of your enemies is actually way more important than your own party composition. Because if you make a really good party composition but you don't know anything or not a lot about your enemies, you're still going to struggle. I just know every enemy pretty much, you know, to their full extent with how many hours I've played. And I found myself saying, okay, if we knock down this person, then this person gets pushed. Even though it's not a great party, we get to mitigate a lot of the stress damage, and we get to mitigate a lot of the HP damage. And like I said, I found myself using parties that were mediocre to bad, and they were still getting out relatively unscathed. So what did this run reinforce for me? I used to believe stress damage was like the actual killer of a campaign, and I do mean a campaign. I don't mean a dungeon run or a battle. And playing through this, I realized 100%. I think stress damage is what makes this game so much more of a grind for a majority of people, but it's kind of in the background, even though it's very much in the foreground when you're in battle, you know what I mean? So when you take more stress damage and you leave dungeons with stress damage, well, actually, let's not even leave the dungeon first. You get an affliction mid-dungeon, that may be the end of your dungeon, or a death. You know, like, obviously some people can skip their turns, stun your allies, do skills you don't want to do, not get hit, you know, like, obviously you know everything that comes with affliction. That can end a dungeon run, which we will talk about the snowball effects later. But let's say you do get out. You get out with one person afflicted, but everyone else now has 40, 50 stress. Well, end of dungeon stress translates to higher percent quirk chance. It's a 25% base quirk chance plus some formula with stress. I don't remember the exact formula, but the more stress, the higher chance you get for a negative quirk. So more negative quirks obviously means you'll have to spend more time in the sanitarium, or you just get bad negative quirks you can't take off. Perfectionist, clumsy, slow start, name them. You know, there's plenty of bad quirks out there that you do not want to start stacking up quickly. So I found a lot of my heroes were getting out with like 30, 40, 50 stress. And it was that awkward range where it's like, we were never scared of being afflicted, but now they got a lot of stress coming out of the dungeon. They got a negative quirk. And I had to use stress facilities, which, let me tell you something. If I play for serious, they're always the last things I upgrade. I get out with almost 15, 20 less for stress on, and I do mean literally almost every dungeon. I come out with 20 stress for less. I want to say I come out with most dungeons with 10 stress for less, but, you know, sometimes you have almost 0 stress on every hero. You take the last fight, you get hit with like 2 stress incantations, you're at 30. You get like 1 inspiring 2, you're down 19. Like, it happens. Like, sometimes you're dungeon stress free, and then the last battle you're like, well, can't do much about that, right? But overall, I would say if you watched my serious playthroughs, I get out rather unscathed once we get to veteran and champion. But let's come back to that whole thing, why stress increases the grind and increases the pressure on the player. We already talked about maybe failing the dungeon. Well, now your heroes don't level up, and they get all the additional stress of backing out of the dungeon, which will probably cause 70 to 80 stress on everybody. So now you got everyone between like 60 and 100 stress, right? You got people afflicted. You probably got 3 negative quirks, maybe 4 if you're really unlucky. Now that means even if you have 3 spots open in the sanitarium, that's who knows how much gold. I mean, if we're talking champion, now you're talking, could be anywhere between like 6,000 if it's a fresh quirk, or if you're trying to remove an old one, it could easily be like 50. I mean, it could be 5 figures in gold. It could be 5 figures in gold. That person's gone for a week, and even if you do get their stress removed, I mean, even if you get their negative quirk removed, you now have to remove the stress. You can easily spend 5 figures in gold multiple times for the same 4 heroes for 1 dungeon. A, that's a lot of money. B, that's a lot of weeks not to have certain heroes if you may need them. Like, if your man-at-arms is the only man-at-arms you have, or, you know, highwayman, name it, the class you like, you might have to go 2 weeks without them. And that's pretty tough, especially if you're learning the game, you really like that class, it's one of your stronger classes, and, you know, now they're out for 2 weeks. It's not good. And not to mention that, I just assumed your stress facilities and sanitarium were like max upgraded. You might have to start spending crests, portraits, and busts upgrading other stress facilities, which means you're taking away from the sanitarium, which is obviously very useful for negative quirking and disease removal, and you'll be taking portraits away from making your skills a better level, or at least cheaper, which once again If your skills aren't cheaper, now you're paying more for skills because you're paying for stress. See how this starts snowballing? You go from one failed dungeon where you didn't get the money in the resolve. You back out. They all become stressed, possibly afflicted with negative quirks. They all go into the sanitarium that is not nearly as upgraded as you want it to be, because you have to go to the Abbey where you have to put in your bust and crest, and you have to go to the tavern probably, because most likely some of those heroes can only stress heal one way because of their negative quirk. So then you're spending portraits and bust and stress facilities. You're then paying money in those stress facilities, and then when they get out of those stress facilities, everything you want to put on them is significantly more expensive because you couldn't take those portrait and crest and jam them into the the guild, whatever it's called. So I truly believe that stress damage is what actually bloats this game's runtime, because one failed dungeon, as we just heard and discussed, could easily equal 2 or 3 extra dungeons for those people. So if you're new to the game and you fail, like, I don't want to say every other dungeon, but let's say you fail 1 out of 4, which, 75% success rate. But if you play for 40 weeks, you're adding like potentially another 40 weeks. You might have to play 80 weeks, and I know it sounds kind of crazy, to get to somewhere where someone's at 40 to 50 weeks. Like I said, I know in theory that sounds maddening, but it's actually not, because that almost lines up with my first playthrough. I took, I don't even know how many weeks. It was over 2 years, because I got the achievement, I think it was, for like 2 years. I mean, that's 104 weeks. I was really slow in my first campaign. Any other campaign I play after that, I'm beating it like 60, 70. And I didn't win at 104, mind you. I got the achievement. I probably ended on like 120, 130. So I probably doubled my playtime to get to the end in worse condition than I did in 70 weeks. And that's because I knew what I was doing, and I didn't have to spend all of those additional resources on that stuff. Because when I was playing, I've always played on the edge with money. I'm not really, how do I want to say it? I know how to be smart with my money, my goal in this game. I know what you should and you shouldn't buy. I play reckless because I've played this game so much, I can do it. But I'll admit, there was a few dungeons where when I failed them, I didn't fail many dungeons in this playthrough, but I definitely failed a few, maybe 3 to 5. And it hurt. I was right on that edge of like, oh man, if I don't beat this next dungeon well, like, not a lot of people get stressed, I don't get a lot of money, we could have been in serious territory. Now, I pulled through, but there was definitely a few weeks where I was selling every trinket I had. I was taking 3/4 of the food, half the bandages, half, like, my provisions were dog. No bad trinket was left behind. They were all sold, so I could keep this ship barely above water. So even when I know what I'm doing, dungeon failures for me was still painful. I just know how to stretch my gold to its maximum. But there could have easily been one point in this campaign where done. Could have just snapped and game over. So my final thoughts. There weren't too many things this playthrough really brought to light, only because I played the game so much. But it definitely, it did open my eyes on that parties that may not look good on paper can still do dungeons okay to decently well. I'm not going to say, once again, they're the cream of the crop, you won't go down with 0 stress. But I played with parties where I started, like, I don't want to say vibe with them, but I was like, this is interesting, this is different. It broke the mundane of me always picking parties and heroes I strongly rely on. I played almost every hero, a lot of heroes in different positions, a lot of Vestals in front row. Still don't like them, but I had to do it. And I had to do it in dungeons where a front row Vestal in the Weald are terrible. So, played a bunch of bad parties. But what it really taught me was who on the enemy composition, well, not taught me, it really brought forward reinforcing who on the enemy composition do we want to lock down first with this party. That's the big thing. This party. Not in general, not in the game. What does this party have to get away with? And that is something that I kind of always assumed in a party composition, but it really came to light that, hey, you can take in any party composition as long as you understand what it needs to do. to the enemy party composition. There's no set start against certain enemy compositions because your party may be better at stress heals. It may be better at physical heals. It might be good at burst damage, but not so much afterwards. Or the party ramps up, so how do we deal with it on turn 2 rather than turn 1? So I thought it was really great. It really, once again, brought out the game in a new light for me. This game never fails to disappoint me on learning new things, or finding new heroes I like, or fighting enemy compositions with your own bad ones. Overall, this was a blast. I would highly recommend it. I will put out a video on how to do the Excel sheet, but overall, as long as you can find a way to randomize positions 1 through 4 with your hero roster, go for it. You could easily go into like Google and say like random number 1 through like 18. And then on your own sheet where in game you could count down like to 12, whatever. There's ways you can do it. I just thought the Excel sheet was a little easier, and I'll show what I did for it. But there's a lot of other ways you can randomize your own party. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you liked the campaign if you didn't watch it. If you found this video somewhere else and you're like, what is he talking about? Go check out a few episodes. They get fun. I get stressed in the game and in real life because I'm a perfectionist, and some of these parties truly hurt my soul. Thank you so much for watching. Like and subscribe below.